In the quiet town of Salem, Massachusetts, the streets were still bathed in the cool light of dusk. The place was renowned for its rich history, witch trials, haunted tours, and legends that stretched back hundreds of years. But no one spoke of the one legend that had been buried deep beneath the cobblestone streets and whispered only by those who knew of its existence. The legend of a car, an inhuman monster in the form of gleaming metal and blood-red paint. This car wasn't just a machine, it was something far worse. It was a living, breathing entity with a hunger that transcended time. Its name was Christine. For decades, no one had spoken of Christine, at least not openly. After the strange events in 1983, when a string of bizarre accidents and deaths were tied to the car, people assumed it had been destroyed. The Plymouth Fury, sleek and red, with a mind of its own, was crushed and gone for good. Or so they thought. But legends have a funny way of coming back. It was the fall of 2024 when Ethan McAllister, a 20-year-old college student, first saw Christine. He had grown up in Salem, surrounded by stories of witches and hauntings, but none of that fazed him. To Ethan, the supernatural was nothing more than folklore, stories invented to bring tourists to the town. His real passion lay in cars, classic cars. He loved the roar of an engine, the sleek lines of muscle cars from the 60s and 70s, and the thrill of the open road. One afternoon, while scrolling through a local auction site, Ethan stumbled upon a listing for a car that caught his attention, a 1958 Plymouth Fury. The picture was grainy, and the listing didn't give many details, but something about the car intrigued him. The starting bid was shockingly low, considering the rarity of the model. It seemed like a steal. The auction house was just outside of Salem, nestled in a small town called Marblehead, known for its antique shops and historical sites. Ethan made the trip, curious to see the car in person. When he arrived, he was greeted by the auctioneer, a grizzled man in his 60s who looked like he'd seen better days. "The Plymouth Fury?" the man asked, his voice gravelly. "Not many people come looking for a car like that anymore." Ethan nodded. His curiosity piqued even further. The auctioneer led him to a back lot where the car was stored. It sat under a thick layer of dust, but even in its neglected state, there was something undeniably striking about it. The car was a deep blood red, its chrome gleaming faintly in the fading sunlight. As Ethan ran his hand over the hood, a chill ran down his spine. The air seemed to grow heavier, and for a moment, he could swear he heard something. An engine revving faintly in the distance, but the lot was empty, save for the Fury. "Is there a history to this car?" The auctioneer hesitated for a moment, his eyes narrowing. "That car's been around a long time. Last owner swore it was cursed, said it killed anyone who crossed it." Ethan chuckled, brushing off the comment as a joke, but the auctioneer's expression remained deadly serious. "You can laugh all you want, kid, but that car's seen some things. It's better off left alone." Ethan ignored the warning, and with a few quick bids, the car was his. Ethan spent the next few weeks working on restoring the car. He brought it back to his father's garage, where he spent hours buffing out the scratches, replacing old parts, and bringing the engine back to life. As he worked, the car seemed to respond to him, almost as if it were eager to run again. The engine purred under his hands, the leather seats gleamed after being restored, and the deep red paint was now as vibrant as it had been when it first rolled off the assembly line in 1958. But strange things began happening. One night, after a long day of work, Ethan went inside to grab some dinner. When he returned to the garage, the radio in the car was on, playing an old 1950s rock song, Buddy Holly's "That'll Be the Day." The strange part? Ethan hadn't reinstalled the radio yet. He shook it off, thinking maybe he'd accidentally triggered something, but as the days passed, the incidents became more frequent. Tools went missing, only to reappear in strange places. The garage door, which was always locked, would be found open, and every night, The car seemed to gleam a little brighter, as if it were feeding off something. Or someone. It wasn't long before Ethan's friends noticed the change in him. He had become more obsessive, spending all his free time with the car, driving it through the winding roads of Salem and Marblehead late at night. His girlfriend, Alyssa, tried to talk to him about it.
"You're acting weird," she said one evening as they stood outside the car. "You're spending more time with this thing than you are with me."
Ethan rolled his eyes. "It's just a car, Alyssa. It's not like it's alive." But even as he said the words, he didn't fully believe them. The first real sign that something was wrong came on a cold October night. Ethan had been out for a drive in the Fury, cruising along the coast near Marblehead. The wind was whipping through the trees, and the sky was dark with an oncoming storm. As Ethan rounded a sharp bend in the road, another car, a sleek black Mustang, came up behind him, its headlights flashing. The driver revved the engine, clearly challenging him to a race. Ethan grinned, his competitive streak kicking in. He floored the gas pedal, and the Fury roared to life, its engine growling as it sped down the winding road. The Mustang was fast, but the Fury was faster. Ethan felt a surge of adrenaline as the car flew down the empty streets, weaving through the narrow turns with precision. But then something changed. The steering wheel jerked in Ethan's hands, and the car seemed to take on a life of its own. The radio blared to life, blasting a Buddy Holly tune at full volume. The speedometer climbed higher and higher, and no matter how hard Ethan tried, he couldn't slow the car down. Panic surged through him as the Fury hurtled towards a narrow bridge. The Mustang, unable to keep up, disappeared in the rearview mirror. The car was going too fast. Ethan knew it was going to crash. But at the last second, the Fury swerved on its own, narrowly avoiding the edge of the bridge and screeching to a halt on the other side. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest as he sat there, gasping for breath. His hands were white-knuckled on the steering wheel, and the car's engine idled quietly, as if nothing had happened. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. The car, it had moved on its own. It had taken control, and for the first time he wondered if the auctioneer's warning hadn't been a joke after all. Determined to understand what was happening, Ethan began researching the car's history. He spent hours online, digging through old newspaper archives and car enthusiast forums. What he found sent a chill down his spine. The car had been owned by a man named Roland LeBay, a mechanic who had purchased it brand new in 1958. But LeBay wasn't just an ordinary car enthusiast, he was obsessed with the car. His wife and daughter had both died under mysterious circumstances, and rumors swirled that the car had been involved. After LeBay's death, the car had passed through several owners, each one meeting a tragic end. Accidents, disappearances, unexplained deaths, all tied to the car. And then there were the reports from the survivors, those who had managed to escape Christine's grasp. They spoke of the car moving on its own, of hearing voices, and of a sinister presence that seemed to inhabit the vehicle. Ethan's stomach turned as he read the accounts. The car wasn't just dangerous, it was evil. It had a mind of its own, and it was hungry for blood. By the time Halloween night rolled around, Ethan was desperate. The car was becoming more aggressive, more controlling. It no longer waited for Ethan to start it. It would rev its engine in the middle of the night, the headlights flashing as if it were taunting him. The radio would blare at odd hours, always playing the same 1950s rock songs. And then there were the dreams. Horrible, vivid nightmares of the car chasing him, running him down, its chrome teeth gleaming in the darkness. Ethan knew he had to get rid of it, but how do you destroy something that seems indestructible? He decided to confront Christine head-on. Late that night, Ethan drove the car to an old junkyard on the outskirts of Salem. The place was deserted, the perfect spot for what he was about to do. He had a plan. Drive the car into the compactor, crush it once and for all, and end the nightmare. But Christine had other plans. As Ethan approached the junkyard, the car's engine roared to life, and the steering wheel wrenched out of his hands. The car sped forward, its headlights blazing like the eyes of a predator. Ethan struggled to regain control, but it was no use. Christine was in charge now. The car tore through the junkyard, smashing into piles of scrap metal and abandoned vehicles. Ethan's heart raced as he fought to steer the car towards the compactor. But Christine was too strong. She was determined to survive. In a last-ditch effort, Ethan bailed out of the car just as it careened towards the compactor. He hit the ground hard, rolling to a stop as Christine roared past him. The compactor's massive jaws closed around the car, crushing it with a deafening roar of metal on metal. For a moment, Ethan thought it was over. But as the compactor finished its work, the twisted, mangled remains of Christine began to shift. The headlights flickered to life, and the radio crackled to life once more, playing a final haunting refrain of "That'll be the day." Ethan watched in horror as the car began to reform itself, piece by piece. Christine wasn't done, not yet. Ethan left Salem the next morning, leaving behind the car and the town. He knew he could never destroy Christine. She was more than just a car. She was a force of nature, a demon in chrome and steel, and she would always come back. As he drove away, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, and as he glanced in the rearview mirror, he swore he saw a flash of red behind him. A blood-red Plymouth Fury, gleaming in the morning light. Christine was alive, and she was still hungry. And remember, Christine may just be a story, but some legends never die. If you want to uncover more terrifying tales like this one, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell, so you're never alone when the next dark secret is revealed. Leave a like if you survived Christine's return and share this video. But be careful who you share it with. You never know what might come back for you.